So Cherry released on Apple TV Plus a few days ago, and this was a film that has been a long time coming. I remember seeing the very first screenshot from this movie a very long time ago, and this of course is the first film directed by the Russo Brothers post Avengers Endgame and starring Spider-Man himself, Tom Holland. And this film was kind of described as the Russo brothers kind of going in a different direction, doing something we hadn't really seen before, and Tom Holland giving a performance that we'd never quite seen before. So all of that surrounding this film made it quite interesting. Again, it's been a long time coming since that original image up until its release this month. It's definitely been quite the journey. Now, before I actually watched Cherry, I had my own kind of opinion on the movie already kind of decided for me, unfortunately, because I feel like that this film had so much aware of it. Like, there was so much we knew about it before it actually came out, and there was so much we got from the trailers and stuff like that. I pretty much got my own personal idea of what the movie was going to be like before I'd even seen it, and I know we should never judge films before we watch them, but with Cherry, I just knew based on the trailers that this film was going to be going for this very specific direction and was going to be going for this very specific tone and vibe to really make the Russo brothers separate themselves from their previous works. And unfortunately, the movie was exactly what I thought it was going to be. I'll start off with my positives though. Firstly, Tom Holland I do think is genuinely really good in this movie. I mean, I remember one of the first things the Russos ever said about this film was that Tom Holland delivered a performance that was worthy of an Oscar performance or an Oscar nomination, and potentially even an Oscar win. While I don't believe that is true, I don't think this is a top-tier acting performance, in comparison to like other Oscar winners and stuff like that. I don't really feel like it's up on the same level as that. I can see where they were coming from. Like, this is definitely a very powerful performance and a very dedicated one from Tom Holland. We've seen Tom Holland in many different roles at this point, but obviously he's most well known for playing Spider-Man, of course, in the MCU. And last year we watched the film The Devil All the Time, which he delivered a bit more of a serious and dramatic performance. And Cherry is very similar to his performance in The Devil All the Time, but kind of turned up to the next level. And I think that he's really good in this movie. Definitely has the emotional core, definitely has a strong determination. And in terms of his actual character in the movie, I feel like he really bought into that character and really became that character as the runtime went on. I think that Tom Holland was really good in the movie, and again, definitely deserving of the praise he got for his performance. He's very good here, and maybe potentially his greatest performance we've seen yet. And obviously Tom Holland is still very young, and he's still got many more performances to come. And this is definitely very different to what we've seen from him before. Also, I do think the movie is very nicely shot. I do think it has some very nice scenes throughout. I do think it has some very nice looking moments throughout. There are a lot of moments in the film when I was watching it where it just kind of stood out to me that, oh, that was a nice shot, or that looked really good. And I feel like that is this overall sort of aesthetic of the movie that I think is really nice. I do think it's a very nice looking movie, particularly on Apple TV Plus. If you're watching it on Apple TV Plus like I did, in 4K, it's a really nice looking movie, and I do think it does have that going for it, along with Tom Holland's performance and a couple other things as well. Like the score was also very good. I enjoyed that a lot throughout the film. Ciara Bravo's performance was also really good. Like, this movie does have a lot of good things in it. However, I do feel like the positives are vastly outweighed by the negatives. Speaking of those negatives, this movie, as I said at the beginning, is exactly what I thought and what I feared it would be. And that is that this movie is just a incredibly sharp U-turn for the Russos, and I feel like they just want you to know that more than anything else. And I don't want to sound like I'm ripping on this movie too hard, because I don't think it's awful or anything. I just think it's kind of poor, and again, it didn't feel genuine. This movie didn't feel like that it was made because they had this story they wanted to tell. It kind of felt like they had a concept for a movie and they wanted to make it as hardcore as possible to really separate themselves from the likes of the Marvel Universe, which is obviously what they are most known for. They literally directed what was, until a few days ago, the biggest movie of all time in Avengers Endgame. And I feel like that this movie was them really trying to separate themselves from that tone and from that style, away from that family-friendly kind of direction they were in, into this more hardcore, adult-orientated direction, which, of course, they hadn't really done before, at least not to this extent, not this kind of movie or this kind of project. They hadn't really done anything like that before. So to me, this movie overall felt kind of forced, and, as I said, a little disingenuous. It kind of came across like they just had this idea and thought, well, we can make this as hardcore as possible. We're going to chuck in as many F-bombs as we can. We're going to make this as dark and as deep as we can, because we want to make ourselves known as, hey, we're not just the Marvel guys, we're also, we can also do other stuff. We can do these other movies. We can do more, less family-friendly orientated stuff. And that's just kind of how the movie came across to me in the trailers. And unfortunately, after watching it, that's what it came across as a movie itself as well. And unfortunately, while it tries very hard, it doesn't come across to me as impressive. It came across as a little more cringe than anything. And I don't want to use that word, to be honest. Like, I don't like to use that word, when genuinely describing or reviewing a film. But when you see these things that they do in the movie, like, there's some very strange directional choices and very strange shot choices and stuff like that, camera movements, where you just watch it and you think, was that actually done for a specific purpose, or was it just done because it was this interesting technique that they had come up with that they thought, oh, this will be impressive, and they chucked it in the movie for that reason and that reason alone? Because beyond that, I didn't see any other reason why those particular shots were chosen for the movie, or why that particular camera movement was implemented. It didn't really make much sense to me, and it's very messy in terms of its structure. It feels like it's not quite sure what it's trying to do in regards to how it's telling its story. Like, there's this over narration of the movie by Tom Holland's character, which is sometimes there and sometimes it isn't, and there are scenes where it isn't there where it kind of should be, or it is there where it doesn't necessarily need to be. It's just very inconsistent in regards to where that narration is placed, and again, it just it makes the movie feel just a bit messy and a bit overly convoluted for no reason, when the movie isn't convoluted at all. And again, it just comes across as very forced. There's a lot of moments in the film where you kind of see, an overuse of F-bombs. Like, it's just used so much throughout the movie, and again, it doesn't feel natural. It just feels like they just did it because they knew they could, because they had the 18 rating for this movie, and they knew they could do whatever they wanted on Apple TV+. They thought, well, we're going to chuck in as many as we can to separate ourselves. And again, the very dark tone of the movie, while I don't have a problem with the movie being dark, again, it didn't really feel genuine to me. It didn't feel like this was a story that they felt like deserved this hard R rating. It just kind of felt like they had a concept and they thought, well, we can make this hard R to show people that, hey, we can do other stuff. And again, that's just how it came across to me. It was forced, it was disingenuous, and I know they're the words I keep going back to, but they're the words that spring to my mind when I think about this movie. And there's certain other things as well. There are two characters in the film who have the names of Dr. Whomever and Sergeant Whomever, and that's literally their characters' names. And again, it just feels very weird. It's like, what was the point of that? What was the point of those particular character names? Because obviously it's meant to be a joke. It's meant to be kind of, breaking the fourth wall or whatever. But why? Why was that needed? I don't really get it. And again, the Russos aren't this type of directors who have this specific style, at least not yet, to implement an idea like that and kind of run with it. It just didn't really work for me. And again, I feel like that there potentially were other characters in the movie who had that same surname. They were just the two that I picked up upon, but I think there are potentially more in the movie as well. So again, that was a strange thing, and it kind of felt like they just did that as like, oh, this could be funny or quirky. We've never done anything like it before, but let's chuck it in. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm being overly negative for this movie, but I'm just saying what I felt. I'm just saying what I thought of the movie. And again, it's all those elements coming together. It just felt very, very forced, and it felt like they just wanted to make this movie to impress us. And what I need to say to the Russos is, you don't need to impress us. Like, you've already impressed us. You made the biggest movie of all time, for God's sake. You made Avengers Endgame. That's like a huge movie that literally made, it was the highest grossing movie of all time until a few days ago when they re-released Avatar. It was literally the biggest movie of all time, in terms of the scale of that movie and the build-up between that and Infinity War. It was ginormous, that movie. And the amount of people in the film and how much they had to manage. Like, I am incredibly impressed, with what they did with those movies. And I'm a lot more impressed with what they did with those movies than what they did here. And again, it kind of felt like they just did this to separate themselves when they really didn't need to. They could have made this movie without all the bells and whistles on it, and it would have been a pretty compelling, pretty good story, and it would have came across a lot more genuine than what Cherry actually did. Also, the third act in the movie I found to be very repetitive. The first two acts, I was actually on board with the movie. Like, even though I had my problems with it, and I do feel like it was forced, and I do feel like they were kind of trying too hard. In terms of the story, I was on board with the first two acts. I was actually into the story there. But the third act, when he comes back home from the military, that just that was where the movie kind of lost me, because then the story kind of went away, and it was basically just this repetitive story of him taking drugs and then robbing a bank and then rinse and repeat. And that was basically the back half of the movie. And again, it's kind of what the movie was building towards, especially we know from what we knew about the movie was that it was kind of like a bank robbing movie. At least that was the very simple crux of the film. So we kind of knew that was coming, but again, that's kind of all there is to it in the back half. So when you don't have the story as compelling as it was in the first two halves of the film, or the first 2/3 of the film, the other problems I had really began to shine through and really began to become the focal point of the movie, rather than these kind of lower lying persisting problems like they were in the first 2/3. So for me, the third act kind of really let the movie down in regards to the story, and again made those problems a lot more prevalent. So overall for me, Cherry was definitely a bit of a messy movie. Again, I didn't expect it to be as weird as it was. I didn't expect it to be as forced as it was. And again, unfortunately, this movie was kind of exactly what I feared it would be. I was worried that the movie was going to be the Russos trying too hard to separate themselves from their previous work, and unfortunately that's what this film came across as to me. And it's a shame, because I think this movie had a hell of a lot of potential. You know, I think it is a good story at its core, even though I do feel like the third act is repetitive and it does kind of lose grip on the story. The story itself is good. It's very compelling. Obviously, it's based on a novel, which is based on a true story. You know, there's a good story here, but this movie is just plagued and bogged down by so many weird stylistic choices and directional choices that, again, felt very disingenuous. Felt like the Russos stuck them in for really no reason, and it really bogs the movie down. And despite Tom Holland delivering his career best performance so far, it isn't enough to save the movie, and it just kind of comes across as this weird mess that honestly could have been handled by another director, or, you know, less so than the Russos, and it may have come out better than this movie did, unfortunately. But what do you guys think of Cherry? Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. How did you feel about the movie? Because I've seen very divisive opinions on the film. Some people really love it, and some people really hate it. I wouldn't say I hate it or anything like that. You know, I would say I didn't particularly like it that much, but again, there were definitely some redeeming qualities to it, and again, a lot of potential for the film. But what did you think about it? Make sure to let me know your thoughts. And if you want to see more movie reviews like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because my next movie review is going to be for Zack Snyder's Justice League. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. It's going to be awesome. So I hope to see you guys again in my next video, whenever that may be.